Hey, what's up, YouTube? Today I wanted to talk about the new kid on the block, the spawn of the purple jelly bean, and the latest denizen of the void. Yes, I'm talking about the Devourer Demon Hunter spec and whether it is worth your time. Now, before I go into this video, it's important to consider that each person is unique and therefore what they like or dislike about a spec will vary. And I mean, there's a reason why WoW has 40 different specs and still people want more. I mean, I myself have been waiting for the Tinkerer class for ages now, and I'm still waiting. So, whether the Devourer class is fun is highly subjective, and it all comes down to you as a player. Now, I've played the spec for hours on beta, testing it out in various M plus dungeons, and the purpose of this video is not to convince you to try and play Devourer, but instead it is to help you make that decision for yourself based on what my experience has been while playing it on the beta. Alright, so without wasting any more time, I'd like to get into the video. Now, the way I have structured this is that I've broken it down into three sections: the good section, which is where I'll talk about all of the things that are good about the spec; the bad section, which is basically where I'll talk about what are some of the bad things about the spec; and then there's the third section, which I've called the ugly, but that talks about what are some of the things which aren't the worst about the spec, but then, could be improved or perhaps could have been better. So, in my opinion, which falls neither into good or bad, but just, somewhere in between. Starting with some of the good stuff. The spec is highly mobile. Not only can you move and cast a bunch of spells, but it also has a spell called Shift, which is like a Blink 2.0, because not only can you teleport from one point to another like a mage can, but to improve upon it, you can actually use a targeted reticule to aim where you want to be teleported to. And to top it off, it has three charges of it. Next, Void Meta feels incredibly powerful and it is available frequently, and the fact that it is not tied to like a specific timer of 1 minute, 2 minute, or 3 minute, but rather based on how many souls you're able to gather and how quickly, it makes it quite flexible and allows you to min max the timing depending on the cadence of the fight. And I feel like that unlocks a whole new level of skill expression with this spec. Casting Collapsing Star feels amazing because not only is the animation really cool, but it also feels very satisfying when you see your DPS numbers jump up after the cast. And therein lies another aspect of min maxing the spec, which is how many collapsing star casts can you fit into a single void meta window. And I think that just feels amazing and it's like a really great mini game. It also brings a strong raid buff, Chaos Brand, like Vengeance and Havoc do. In addition, it also brings some really strong AoE crowd control utility with Sigil of Misery and Void Nova. To top it off, because it is a mid range spec, it also gets a ranged kick, making your life that much easier in keys. It's fairly tanky with two charges of blur, and you can also talent it to darkness. And the best part, or should I say the second best part, is that it gives you access to two different playstyles. The first one being the ranged caster kind of style with the Annihilator build, and the second one being more of a hybrid kind of playstyle where you are jumping in and out of melee range to do your damage, and this is enabled by the Void Guard build. It kind of makes it feel like the Red Mage from Final Fantasy, and I think this is really great because, as you know, variety is the spice of life. And coming to the best part about the spec, the visuals. Oh God, the visuals on the spec are so great. Like, I cannot take my eyes off of the spec every time I'm playing. That's also caused me to sometimes stand in mechanics because I was so distracted by the animations. But I guarantee you, every time you watch this spec play, the animations are just pure eyegasm. Now that we covered the good stuff, we have to talk about the bad stuff. And I really hope that Blizzard makes some improvements to this. I think one of the worst things is that while your void meta feels really powerful, the bad side of this is that if you make any mistakes during this void meta, you are really trashing your DPS. I mean, if you mess this up, your DPS will drop like an apple on Newton's head. Another aspect of the spec which I don't really like is its rampy playstyle. Sometimes it just feels like it takes forever for it to ramp up. This is further exaggerated when you're actually in a key playing with specs like Red Paladin and Devastation Evokers, who like to bring all of the damage up front. When you're playing with these classes, it feels like you're a grandma trying to cross a road along with your dog and your grandson who've already zipped across the road, and you're just crawling there slowly, and they're waiting for you to get there slowly. And finally, perhaps the most painful thing is that when you're heading up to a boss, or perhaps you're doing that first big pull in a dungeon where you want to lust as soon as the pull is done, all of the other DPS are popping up your CDs while you're sitting there ramping. And did I mention slowly? Yeah, that just feels bad. The thing is, by the time you're done with your ramp and you're ready to enter into Void Meta and cast that collapsing star, the rest of the DPS in your party are already done bursting and the pack is half dead, especially if you're in low keys. Because the only way around it is if the group holds the lust for you to get into your burst phase, and nobody is going to be doing that unless you're bringing obscene amounts of damage where it's actually worth others holding their cooldowns for you to actually get into your void meta. And this means that you're forced to constantly pre prep void meta as you head into a pack or towards a boss. And this is not always possible when you're in a pug situation. And finally, with the ugly stuff. The melee playstyle can be very punishing, especially if you're not mindful of when you're pressing Void Blade to charge in. This can potentially cause vibes because imagine this, you're ready to charge in and the boss just does a mechanic, or perhaps there's a swirly on the floor and you rush right into the mechanic. Well, in lower keys, you might be able to get away with this, but as you go higher and higher, especially in the highest of keys, that's going to one shot you and you're going to be left there face tanking the floor. It's kind of reminiscent of the Dragoon job from Final Fantasy, if you ask me. And that's not very fun. Another concern I have with the spec is that if there's a bunch of swirlies spawning on the floor, for example, the first pull of Alcatar Academy, you either have to cancel the cast or get slapped by the swirly. And that's not very fun because while technically you can move while channeling Void Ray, you move slower than a snail, uphill, in rainy weather, with the wind blowing against you. Need I say more? The third thing, which I would say is a little bit of a pain point for me, is that the decay rate on Void Meta is fairly quick, which means that if you've already activated your Void Meta, you only have so much time to fit in as many collapsing stars as possible. Now, if you're forced to move during that time, maybe a pool gets dropped in the wrong location, or maybe the tank moves unexpectedly, or one of the many reasons that you come across in a Mythic Plus dungeon, you actually end up losing on one to two collapsing star casts depending on how bad the situation is. And that reflects on your DPS meter. And then when that happens, you're going to be bombarded with questions like, why is the DPS so low, bro? And that does not feel good. Another concern which many people have talked about in the community is spam casting consume slash devour. See, the problem is that it feels fine to begin with, but after you've done a bunch of keys back to back, it starts feeling, how should I put it? Stale. And I'll be honest with you, I'm afraid that I might end up breaking the key that's bound to that action eventually. And the last thing is that lower keys and small pulls feel incredibly bad for Devourer Demon Hunter. And it becomes even worse when you're doing like small pulls in lower keys, because there you're doing tank levels damage or even less. With all of that said, I did have a few ideas about how spec can potentially be improved. First one, I like the recent change to Collapsing Star where you don't lose souls anymore if you have to cancel the cast or move in between. I think that was something everyone was asking for in the community, and Blizzard actually listened and implemented that. But what they've also done is that every time you are forced to move or you cancel cast midway, it triggers an ICD at the start of the cast. And this is a 5-second ICD. Now, I feel like this 5 seconds is a bit too long. I would have hoped for something smaller, perhaps something in the range of 2 seconds or 3 seconds, maybe 2.5 seconds is the sweet spot. I'm not sure. I'll leave it to Blizzard to figure that out. But essentially, what happens is that if you're forced to move towards the end of a cast, it's fine. You don't really feel like you've lost out on a lot because the ICD triggers at the start of the cast. But there are scenarios, especially in pugs, where sometimes you can be forced to move at the start of a cast. Maybe it's a pushback, maybe it's some other mechanic due to which you have to move as soon as you begin casting. And then having to wait for 5 seconds to recast it, that kind of feels bad. And it's also a DPS loss. Another idea which I had for the spec, and this sort of addresses the part where spam casting consume or devour feels extremely stale, is I would try to add another spell which could perhaps be like a dot spell. So let's say, for example, that you apply this dot on one target and then you use consume to sort of spread it out. I feel like this would address 2 points. The first one being that because you're weaving this dot in between your consume slash devour cast, the rotation doesn't feel as stale. And on top of that, this dot would also help with additional soul generation, thereby shortening your ramp up time. So I feel like a solution like this, where you're hitting two birds with one stone, would be really effective and work wonders for the spec. Blizzard, if you're watching this, please, can we have one more spell on Devourer? Pretty please. Lastly, and this is a bit more general feedback for Blizzard, I think that pretty much all of the specs that have been released during pre-patch, they kind of feel incomplete because of three key reasons. The first one being we don't have access to our Apex talents. We don't have our tier sets because the Midnight tier sets are not in the game at the moment, and the War Within tier sets have been changed to just provide a flat damage buff. So essentially, you don't have any interaction going on over there. And the third one, we don't even have all of our hero talent points because you're not level 90 yet. I think this makes for a pretty terrible experience on pre patch because all of the specs are feeling incomplete right now. And this feels especially true for Devourer. And this makes me feel like not wanting to play a particular spec. So I don't know if anyone's from Blizzard's actually going to end up watching this video, but I think that this is something that needs to be addressed in future pre patches. So to close out this video, is the Devourer spec worth trying out? Yes, absolutely. It's a new spec and you should definitely give it a shot and decide for yourself whether you like it or not. Now, is it a good spec? I think that's very subjective as well. Personally, I find the spec fun, and I'm not saying that it does not have any shortcomings. It definitely does, and we've talked about it in this video. And I would definitely love to see it improved further as we head into future patches of the Midnight. And I'm definitely going to be playing it a lot more as we head into Midnight. Do let me know your thoughts on the spec, whether you've tried it on beta or on pre-patch. I would love to hear about it. And don't forget to drop a like and subscribe if you enjoyed watching this video. You can also catch me live on twitch.tv/Rathios, where I'll be doing a lot more testing with the Devourer. Thanks a lot for watching. Peace.